This is Retailers Required. This is Bottlebooks webinar. It's a weekly webinar series every time around this time, exactly this time on Mondays. And we wanted to bring you information about the industry, about what's happening now, about how the industry works, knowledge that we've gained, that our panelists know about how the industry runs, and hopefully providing that to you to help everybody out, especially as everybody's at home during this current crisis. You can see previous webinars we've done. You can go to our website. The videos are online. And if you have any questions, just scroll down. There's a Q&A button, and you can type in your questions there, and I will incorporate them into the chat. I'm David, I'm from Bottlebooks, and I will be asking questions and facilitating the conversation today. I'm gonna start off with our extra special last minute guest. Clara Rubin has joined us, which is wonderful. And she has a lot of experience in retail in the UK, so she can provide some great perspective. Matthew from Bottlebooks is here. Matthew is Bottlebooks Sales UK, and also used to work at Waitrose. So not only does he deal with accounts, but he has a history. And Jonathan, the CEO of Bottlebooks, who can tell us all about Bottlebooks, but also is one of the main contacts we have to the Ahold Group, who also collects retail information with Bottlebooks. And so thank you all for joining, and we'll get going. There's a bunch of questions we have, but we'll just let the conversation flow and see where we go. So the first question I think people have when they're registering information, when they're preparing information, when they're working with the retailer, they're being asked for all this information. And so what are the retailers doing with this information? Maybe Clara, we'll start with you. What do you see that the retailers are really using this information for? And why are they asking all of these questions?
Right. Okay. Well, just to clarify, sort of, who I am. I'm speaking from a UK retail point of view. I've worked in the wine industry for 12 years now, in various different guises, and some of which are retail, especially the latest iteration. I work for a company called Graf Wine Company. We're very small importers, specialist importers, but you've asked me here to sort of really talk about retail, UK retail specifically. So really, especially in the last 2 months, a lot of companies have diversified to sell wine online or as part of a takeaway offering. So they might be a restaurant that has diversified their business strategy to make sure that they can still operate, even if it's a sort of skeleton crew or skeleton staff or skeleton business. What they're looking for in terms of actual pieces of information is very, very streamlined information. So it has to be ready, prepared, and delivered. So I've used Bottlebooks to be able to host a lot of that information and have it ready to go. So that is bottle shots of specific wines. So very high resolution bottle shots that can be used on websites, especially now as people are buying online. Tasting notes, really snappy, evocative tasting notes. A lot of those I've had to write or translate, understandably. Some of the tasting notes we get through from producers we work with at Graft are beautifully technical and very, very detailed, but people are looking for very short, snappy tasting notes. Business descriptions, so that is snappy paragraphs about the particular producer, and that can involve a bit of history or a bit of provenance or the origin of how that producer has come to be in the iteration it is. And this all needs to be put through usually a marketing department, but we work with such small producers, such fantastic small esoteric producers, that they are not necessarily prepared to offer this kind of information. And it needs a lot of toing and froing and work with us to be able to prepare that information, to have it ready to go at a moment's notice.
And then where are you delivering this information? Do you have an online shop?
Yeah. So Graft has an online outlet, a B2C, so that's business to consumer. So we do some retail, and so that goes on the Red Squirrel website. But really, this is for our customers' websites and for our customers' social media channels. So again, has to be very short, very, very snappy. So we can't have long, 4-page descriptions of wines, or if it's too technical, customers or consumers are very confused. They don't necessarily taste in the same way the trade does. So we have to streamline those as well. And the other really, really important thing, just to round off that 4, so that's bottle shots, tasting notes, business descriptions, and then a business photo. And again, that's photos of the people making the wine, either in the winery or in the vineyard, that people can connect to. And it can't just be a vineyard or a picture of beautiful tanks or barrels. I mean, I love equipment and I love soil, but people need faces to connect to. So it's got to be the people making the wine or the people representative of that wine. So it's those big 4, really.
Great. And Matthew, you're in conversations with a lot with Waitrose and larger retailers. And what do the larger retailers, what are they doing with this information?
It depends, obviously, on the retailer, but I think so retailers of supermarket size are so vast and so big. What, excuse me, many people possibly sometimes don't realize is that there are multiple teams within retailers that want access to the same types of information. So you have print publications is one angle. You have online websites, whether that is just for information or it is sort of selling as well. And then you also have product information that goes into stores. So all of the information is used in different ways, and there is a large amount of information that retailers require from producers and from suppliers. But it's worth pointing out that each of those bits of information each have their own use. And Clara, I think, hit on a really good word, which was sort of streamlining. It may seem sometimes that a retailer is asking for a ridiculous amount of information, but it's also worth pointing out that within a retailer, you will have a team of buyers who are responsible for sourcing that product, or product developers. You will then have a marketing department who need to take different bits of information to be able to sell your products. On top of that, you will have an e-commerce department whose responsibility is to sell it through to your customers. You will also then have a press or a PR team who are in contact with trade members, journalists around the world or in your specific country, who want different bits of information to be able to share with the journalists. You then also, on top of that, have your supply chain, who also want a certain amount of information based on packaging and logistic information. And then last but also not least is your staff. So within a retailer, you have staff who need access to that information as well. And each of those different fields have different requirements, but ultimately it is all the same product information, just popped into different elements. So there's a variety of reasons and how people could do it. And I think, if you're looking at something like Bottlebooks gives you one place to store all of your information. So while ever you may look at a form that comes from a retailer with a few hundred different fields of information, it's worth remembering that if you do that information the first time and you do it correct and you do it well, you will save yourself a lot of time in the future, because you don't need to reply with more and more information to the retailers again and again and again. And everybody wants to make their life a little bit easier.
And Jonathan, what are you seeing? How are retailers using information, the retailers that you're working closely with?
Well, I think as Matt was explaining, there's some very common and standard use cases across all retailers, and I think it is quite interesting to see how many different teams and how many different people inside and outside the beer, wine, and spirits teams are using the information. We've also noticed that compliance is becoming a bigger topic. or if it seems to be becoming a bigger topic, that there's been more audits done recently. And so certificates are paramount, and something that we found interesting for us, and that not everybody else is aware of, is that the compliance applies not only to the producers but also to any importers or distributors, and that just because the producer has their certificate, that doesn't cover all the requirements. The importer or distributor also needs to have a certificate that certifies them in being able to distribute the wines. And so it is a lot of paperwork for people to collect, but it's yet another team, and a team that needs this and demands it. But I think also outside of compliance, and I think this goes to also what Clara was saying about the streamlined information. I would even extend that one step further and say it's streamlined and structured information. We are seeing retailers also experimenting and going past experimentation with things like chatbots. So when you're looking at the online retail, it's not just, it's important to have the stories there and have it searchable. But then there's other ways of interacting with customers, such as chatbots, and the chatbots need structured data. If you're going to search, for food that pairs well with steak, you don't want to see the same 5 wines that come up for when you're searching for sushi. So having, this detailed information about the wines allow it to be a lot richer experience for consumers.
And Clara, when you get a new, when Graf gets a new producer, what makes your day in terms of how they come to you prepared? what is great? Like, how can a producer who even a smaller, medium-sized importer, or how can they be ready for a retailer?
In an ideal world, the producer would have heard of Bottlebooks, already be on Bottlebooks, and have all their products and vintages set up on Bottlebooks, so I can just add them to our portfolio, obviously. But failing that, which is a situation I often find myself in, I first of all have to prepare them for the amount of information that I'm asking them for. So Matthew alluded to this in the sense that it sounds like for a lot of producers to import into the UK, they're being asked for a lot of information, sort of endless reams of information. But remembering that there are often very different departments within one company, be that a small importer or a bigger retailer like Waitrose. There's lots of different people asking for information in all different kinds. And one of the great things I love about Bottlebooks is that it can do all of those things. So it can ask for case dimensions and weights, and also, it can really be geared to anything. And that's why I really like working with it. What would be a dream is that if a producer already had a lot of, from my point of view, a lot of the comms or PR or marketing stuff already written, already streamlined and ready to go, and that these concepts aren't new to people. So, and I won't drop names here, but some of the worst case scenarios I've had to explain to people exactly what I mean when I say a tasting note, because that's not necessarily something that is readily available for all wines, or something that all producers are willing to write, which is fine because we can write those ourselves. But I think what would ideally happen, and the biggest thing that I come across, is people not ready to talk about themselves, not having a business description ready to go, and haven't really thought about who they are or what people might want to know about them. So
Have you ever seen a situation where that's affected their sales?
Yes. Yes, very much so. And maybe because Graft is a company that is very producer-led, we don't start working with someone lightly. We want to make sure that we're ready to go by understanding who they are, because it's so important to UK consumers that they now understand where their wines are coming from, what is so significant about this producer, how does this producer work, We have a very mature market in the UK in the sense that people are ready for certain amounts of technical information. A lot of people are ready to talk about different producer styles, as in different business types, whether that is a brand or it is a vineyard owning producer, so more of a domain rather than a negociant. And people are ready to have those conversations, and they understand that. So they really want to know who they're buying from.
And Matthew, do you, in your experience, how can producers prepare? What's the difference between, even large producers? Are they all prepared? Do they know what they're doing? Do they have the information? Is it in the right format? Is it the right way? What do you see out there in terms of how the producers can prepare beforehand with a strong relationship with the retailer?
So if using Bottlebooks, for instance, there is quite often, and I think we've touched upon it in previous webinars, where small producers have their own challenges in terms of kind of having enough people to be able to provide the information sort of quickly and readily and potentially in the form they want. But also from large producers' point of view, they often have multiple teams who aren't talking together. So something like Bottlebooks allows everybody to have all of that information shared in one place. And if you can have everybody inputting to create as much data and content as possible, then that's brilliant. But one of the things that can happen is if you're going to visit a retailer and you're taking along your wines, and typically people will sort of take a small box of maybe 6 wines, and a producer may have then put together 1 or 2 bits of information on a sheet of paper that could have been done quickly or not so well. And so the varying levels of quality between producers is quite important. And also that would historically have been a sheet of paper. You take it in, you leave a sheet of paper with a buyer and hope that they won't take it to the shredder and that they will remember that information going forward. What you can actually do on Bottlebooks, if you've got all of your information on there, is you can share all of your product information ahead of time with the retailers and the people that you're going to go. You can create your own product information sheets that will all look standardized and all look pretty, that you can send straight to them, and you can remind people that that information is there. If a retailer then likes you, they have access to all of your information and questions that they may have sent you an email, they may have picked up a phone, tried to speak to you, and having the number of communication contacts trying to gain more and more information by having everything in one place just makes that whole process so much easier to go, look, my information's here you go, I've shared it with you, please use it as you see fit.
Great, and I just want to thank everybody for joining. This is a Bottlebooks webinar series. Every Monday we have a new webinar. This is about retailers required. We'll send you a email afterwards with link to the video, and you can watch and share afterwards, including all the other videos that we've done. And if you have any questions, down here there's a Q&A button. You can type in, ask any questions, and then I'll ask that of the panelists.
We've had one in the
Jonathan
chat as well.
Yeah. Jonathan, what about in the Netherlands? What are you seeing there in the relationship that Hull and Hull and Delays have with their suppliers, and especially with this? I know we have in Bottlebooks a product-based request, which is kind of the strongest system that we know of in terms of getting the correct information from suppliers. What's that relationship like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's nothing that's really unique in many cases amongst all the retailers that we work with. And I think, this webinar above even more than the previous one sounds very much like a Bottlebooks advertisement. But I think it just also, I think, goes to show a little bit about how much we have been working with retailers and how much that has found its way into sort of how the system works. And one of those is one of the newest things was something that we were able to bring out in January of this year, called a product-based request. And this took the collections, particularly for retailers, one step further, where it's now able to provide automatic matching of products between identification systems. So for everybody that works in retail, of course, you're familiar with how little a barcode says about a wine, and how it's reused across vintages, or you might have multiple barcodes for one vintage at the other end of the spectrum, and how difficult it is to match the data sets. And so part of the product-based request was done in order to make this matching automatic. And in the process, it also had a second aspect, which was very precise accounting. So more than ever, the software could automate the reminders to people who were still needing to submit information. At the same time, completely stop reminders to everybody who was complete. And so it meant that communications were just another step more of efficiency, and that you just had one less email in your box when you were done. But I think it was just to further streamline and the communications between retail and their supply partners, and simplify and increase the efficiency of the process.
Great. And Clara, a lot of retailers, and this is a big thing for us, that retailers ask us for our certificates, organic certificates, all of this. I know that because you're special, you deal with a lot of vegan wines, and you deal with a lot of these certificates. What is this like for a retailer? Maybe you could just open up why you're asking for this stuff. Like, can't we just tell you why are there so many more questions about this now?
Okay. Well, I did notice the question in the chat about what certificates and compliance, and I'm sure that you'll answer those questions afterwards. But in terms of certificates and compliance, there's this I've done so many talks and tastings to the UK hospitality industry and to other retailers in the UK about what are these certificates that people need. And it's because consumers, as I mentioned before, there's a very mature market here. Consumers are starting to learn certain buzzwords that are really important to them. And those could be things like organic, biodynamic, natural, and vegan. And again, I seem to be obsessed with lists of 4, but yes, it's 4 of those. So we find a lot of our producers are organic, but in conversion, or biodynamic in practice, or and explaining to consumers that natural is not a certification is fine. People are all right with that. But vegan is one of those things that comes up again and again, and it's because of various documentaries and things and press coverage. I think probably over 5 years ago now, about sort of what's in your wine. There was a program called Dispatches Investigates, and it was what's in your wine. And people were really shocked that actually not all wines are vegetarian or vegan friendly. So this means additions in the finding and filtration stage of production that could be things like casein, which is milk derivative, or gelatin, or isinglass, or things like that. And that's things that really the UK market is not prepared to have in their wine. The natural wine movement struck us pretty strong in the UK, not just in London, but it obviously swept north and through the major cities, and it's something that's quite important to people. So a lot of retailers want to know if a wine is vegan or vegetarian friendly, because they will be asked by consumers. The definition of a vegan friendly wine has been the subject of hot debate for a couple of years at least. And my job at Graft, one of the major things I tend to do is explain to producers what we mean by a vegan wine. That doesn't just mean additions during the fining process, but it can also mean vineyard practices. So whether vineyards are using blood and bone and manure in the vineyard, if they are, that again is not a vegan friendly wine. Or in very extreme cases with some retailers, if animal labor is being used in the vineyard, again, not a vegan friendly wine. So these are things that we get asked a lot, and we have a reputation in the UK for being a sort of very trustworthy company. If you want to buy vegan wines, you can come to us, and that's because of the information we collect, and that's because of the questions we ask producers one of those many, many questions that seems to be endless when you start importing. So the definitions are quite strict, but that's from a point of view of giving consumers as much information as possible and allowing them to make a decision on whether they want to purchase.
I think you're on mute, David.
Oh, he's gone. Whoever that was in the chat, Patrick, you're very welcome for the description on what vegan wines do.
Patrick. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you. Sorry. And so Matthew, go around the block again. What are retailers doing with this information? Are they how do they, in terms of reporting? I mean, are they able to use this information to give them insights into what's happening? Are they that organized? Does this help the retailers make future buying decisions?
Yes. In a word, it absolutely does. I think it's worth drawing probably a slight distinction between what retailers or large retailers can typically report on versus what they can report on if they have additional information. So most retail systems, and from a sort of a national sort of database perspective, will probably be able to differentiate in terms of how wines are categorized, that by country and by color, and that's pretty much it. So they are sort of bracketed into a field. So it could be a Bordeaux red wine is probably about as low as you can drive down in terms of your reporting. If, however, you have additional information, so you've collected all the information that your wine is organic, or your wines are suitable for vegetarians or suitable for vegans, what that then allows a retailer to be able to do is to compare rates of sale between vegan wines and non-vegan wines, and be able to look at information sort of year-on-year growth of wines that have sort of vegan, and be able to then analyze the trends. And there will then be a move, certainly from large retailers, where if they are controlling the product, so if it's an own label product, for instance, there is a strong desire from most retailers now to ensure that all of their wines are suitable for vegans. And it's not necessarily that they want to jump on the vegan bandwagon, and it's more of the fact that they don't want to exclude any of their customers in their choices. And if you have an option as a producer of potentially using a vegan fining agent, then that is what they would prefer that you can do with that information. So there's lots of kind of ways that people can use that information. And another aspect from the retailer side is being able to sort of filter down into different areas. So if they are asked to provide reporting on all of their French white wines that are suitable for vegans, they can do that very, very quickly by having that information in ways that they possibly can't do on their large scale reporting level. So having all of that information is very, very important.
And Jonathan, are there any other use cases that retailers are finding? How are they using the information that they're collecting from their suppliers? I know that we have some things in Germany using QR codes and stuff. Maybe you could talk a little bit about anything else, any other kind of things that you're seeing in the market.
Well, I think the online and digital is definitely prominent right now, but at the same time, the in-store marketing, especially for the national retail chains that have been able to stay open, that's still present, and you still have education programs that you need to do. So even with things moving online, you still have the rest of the business to run, and in some situations, the best resource that the company has is their online website. So the education or the knowledge is across the business is only as good as the website. But it is also bringing digital a bit more into the store, as I think it's been a trend in many markets where the prevalence of electronic shelf labels has increased, where they can be, instead of going around and putting paper tags on the shelf, that they can be changed centrally and digitally. And this has seen increased prominence, across Europe at least. And one of the great use cases with the electronic shelf labels is to bring digital into the store. And we have one of our first national retailers in Germany that's rolling out a QR code solution to the retail, so that you're able to go through and you're able to scan the QR code at the electronic shelf label and get wine on your device in the store, even when a sales staff is not around or not necessarily trained in it. So I think that's a blurring of lines. The technology is kind of caught up, and that you are able to do these things in the store that might have been more complicated or more costly a few years ago. So there are some very interesting offline or real world trends as well.
And so, Clara, I'll just give you the last word. We've talked a lot about some trends, vegan. We've talked about going online. Obviously, the world's totally upside down right now. What do you think will be lasting from this? Do you think there's like, do you have a feel for anything else? Or what are we going to go back to normal in a year or whenever this ends? Or do you think life will be changed for how we sell wine?
Well, life is changed. There's no getting away from that. And I think one thing from our point of view in the UK, and from what I'm seeing from off-trade and on-trade customers, is that off-trade at the moment is king. We in the UK have not suffered the level of lockdown that some countries have suffered. South Africa, for example, all sale distribution of alcohol is completely prohibited. Just to use an example. The UK, I cannot see a scenario in which that would ever happen. The UK's love of the off-trade is, I think, worth writing poetry about, and people have. So off-trade is something that definitely will, it'll survive a lot before it ever shuts down. And I think what we're seeing now is so many other different kinds of businesses ready to diversify into the off-trade. So our on-trade customers diversified very, very quickly, and as such needed to be ready to go with all that information. So because we had a lot of that information ready, they were able to diversify fast and react very, very quickly. So I think it's a very big question. So one thing I will say is that there is no going back to what we were, because what has happened is what has happened. So people have learned from that experience, and they're ready to diversify their business strategy and their model. And I think the lasting lesson is that off-trade is king. It's not going anywhere. People want to buy wine, they want to engage with people that make wine, and they definitely want to do it under their own terms. And that means information.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining. Next week, we're going to have a webinar. It's going to be a special thing where we're having people who are trying the new Bottlebooks portfolio. We have a beta version. We're going to send you a link tomorrow with the link to this video. And if you want to join next week, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the new portfolio. Jonathan, do you want to say a few words about what people can expect in the new portfolio?
Sure. Thanks. Yeah. So this is something that we, if you joined another webinar, we mentioned it before as well. It's something that we're really excited about. We've been working on it for about 6 months now. And the new release is what we've done before with Bottlebooks. It's been a bit more focused on the businesses who are collecting information and providing the tools to businesses such as Clara to help them collect the information and track and manage everything. But the new release is really focused on how you use that information, and in particular on wineries, and how you can manage and how you can create information sheets, how you can do custom exports. and just help you streamline and automate these daily activities around the winery and how you can prepare and organize your data. And so we're really excited to have been able to focus on this over the last 6 months. And now that it's out, we're excited to get people's feedback on things that are great about it and things that you would like to see us add to it as well. So yeah, so we'd appreciate you taking some time over the next week to look at it and to give us some feedback. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Clara, so much for joining us last minute. It was a real pleasure. Matthew from Bottlebooks, Jonathan from Bottlebooks. Again, we'll send you an email next week. We're doing this webinar series every Monday. Thank you so much for joining, and see you next week.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.